Scanning the stations again. Looking for a familiar song. Through a friendly voice. Only to find yourself here. You're listening to Black Hole Radio.
Flora. She was lost. She had only stopped for a minute and should have had no problem catching back up, but it had been hours since the jungle had swallowed the sound of her group's footsteps. This trip was supposed to be an adventure, a life experience. Now as the sun dropped lower in the sky, it was becoming a nightmare. Panicking and flooded with adrenaline as she pushed through the undergrowth, she didn't even feel it when it happened. Only later, resting by a tree, did she notice the thorn embedded in the web of her thumb. She plucked it out, wincing, and held it up. She looked at her hand. Something thick and frothy oozed from the tiny wound. It tingled. She wiped it on her shorts and took a greedy swallow from her canteen, the last of her water. She looked over her shoulder, back the way she had come, and wondered if she was even still going the right way. Her stomach twisted in knots. By dusk, the tingling had turned to itching that burrowed deep into her arm. Her hand was swollen. The veins in her wrist looked fat and green. She scratched and rubbed at her arm as she walked, but it only grew stiffer and more irritated. Finally, exhausted, she had to stop. She found a spot in the dark that seemed a little softer than the rest and collapsed. Rocking herself in the cold, she cried herself to sleep without noticing how her tears ran slow and thick, sticking to her cheeks and chin like sap. The next morning, she woke up with a groan. She must have slept on her arm at a bad angle, she thought. It was numb. She sat up and looked at her hand. The fingernails were gone. She held her hand up and looked closer. Where each nail had been, there were now little bulbs. They were brownish and translucent. Something yellow curled inside them, like buds. She saw the nails lying on the ground, pale and bright in the mud. Then she looked at the rest of her arm, covered in dirt and muck, drying and peeling in ragged little flakes. She wiped at her arm. It didn't come off. She pinched one of the flakes, meaning to peel it off. The pain was white hot, erupting up her whole arm and down her back. She screamed. Her vision blurred and she thought she was going to black out. After a moment, she looked back down at her arm, breathing hard. It wasn't dirt or leaves stuck to her skin. It was her skin. And now, where she'd pulled, she could see a pink underlayer. Blood. Or was it sap? Welled up in the gash and dribbled slowly down her arm. What was this? An infection? When the pain died down, she stood, staggering to her feet. Her knees shook and she looked around. Nothing looked familiar anymore. Someone must be looking for her by now. She called out. Her voice shrank in the dense silence of the jungle. No one answered. She called out again, and something in her throat creaked. The others were gone. Had they just left her? The sun finally broke the horizon. She could feel it on her skin before she saw it. Something about it seemed to call to her. Her spine felt stiff. Her legs didn't want to move, but she forced them to. Unconsciously wandering with no direction in mind, her thoughts drifted similarly in the heat. After a while, she caught her reflection in a puddle and recoiled. It was like being jerked awake right before you fell asleep. Her eyes were bright yellow and sunken deep in their sockets. The whites and irises were gone. Her pupils were minuscule points. Sap leaked from the corners. Moss framed her face like hair. Lichen clung to her cheeks. She fell to her knees and slurped from the dirty puddle. fingers splayed and stretched like branches across the ground. She gulped and retched, regurgitating mud, then kept drinking. She couldn't feel her feet anymore, because they were no longer feet at all. Her toes sank deep into the dirt, twisting and wriggling down into the cool, damp earth. She tried to stand, but couldn't. She wanted to scream, but couldn't do that either. Her mouth felt rigid, sealed shut in a tight, puckering knot. The sun beamed down on her face. She tried to blink with eyelids that would never so much as twitch again. Suddenly, her arms began lifting toward the sky in slow, jerking convulsions. It was involuntary. Her back arched, then froze in place. Sometime later, after the sun had set and rose twice more, a bird landed on her and pecked violently in the crook of what felt like her elbow, searching for grubs. She'd forgotten her name. She'd forgotten what a name even was. All she could do was watch the bird from the corner of one yellow eye until it finally flew away. By the time a search party reached the area, days later, all they found was the canteen. It was nestled between two thick roots of a strange-looking tree that bent and curved like something with a backbone. The searchers all wondered, though none of them would say aloud, just how does a tree grow like that? The man who had first seen the canteen looked around eagerly, and then dejectedly. She wasn't here. He reached down to pick up the canteen, then yanked his hand back, hissing through his teeth. Far above, half buried in a spider's silk nest, a small yellow eye contracted and swung madly from one person to the other, watching them. None of them saw it, but they could have if they'd only looked up. It rolled sideways and dimmed again to sorrow as they moved on. The man who'd reached for the canteen was already trailing behind the others, head down, scratching his hand.